Good to have you with us here on Ed Schultz News and Commentary from the nation's capital, Center for American Progress. The story that's unfolding and has been for days in Oregon, where these patriots, as they call themselves, have barricaded themselves into a wildlife refuge over a land dispute that a family is having with the Bureau of Land Management. I think most Americans are seeing this story, and the first thing they ask is, what are these nut jobs doing? I wanted to get the perspective of a landowner, someone who lives and works the land and has their whole life. Jane Kleeb, our great friend, she is the director of Bold, Nebraska. She has been heading up this citizen advocacy group since early 2010 and has been one of the most effective advocacy organizations in this country. Stopping Keystone, obviously, was their marquee achievement. She wrote a piece for our website, wegoted.com, and I appreciate it so much. Bundy is all hat, no cattle. And we'll get to that. But this is Bundy, who has joined the occupiers in Oregon, and the rhetoric is unbelievable.
These people need relief, and that is why we're there. And we will not abandon them. We are going to take a defensive position because these matters are so important and because freedom is so precious that we will not back away from this. We also have other patriot groups close, Oregon Constitutional Guard, the Idaho 3%, and other groups that are deploying as we speak and are getting here as quickly as possible. We're going to
form an army is basically what he wants to do. I mean, that's he's grandstanding in a big way, using this issue to bring together a bunch of radicals against the government. I want Jane Kleeb's take on all of this. Jane, good to have you with us.
Thanks, Ed.
You say that he's all hat, no cattle. Unpack this for us. It all started with a prescribed burn, didn't it?
Yeah, so the Hammond family, which is the family that Bundy says he's standing up and defending, which they've been very public that they don't want his help and don't think that his tactics of taking over wildlife refuge with guns is an appropriate thing. But the Hammond family has been dealing with some issues with the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, for several years. It's gone back, over 10 years, where they've done a couple prescribed burns that have gotten out of control. There's always two sides to a story, and I think in small towns, things get piled onto each other. And so I think it's important to know that, one, what they did was wrong, that they set fire to public BLM land that they should not have. Mm-hmm. But their side of the story is that they were trying to do a prescribed burn in order to protect land that essentially, because of climate change, I will say, the land that they were essentially trying to do a prescribed burn on, so it wouldn't, a fire that was trying to kind of come onto their land wouldn't get out of hand even further. But they did it wrong. They didn't do it with the proper permits, which they should have. But things have just kind of piled on, personality conflicts between local BLM land managers and, the ranchers of the Hammond family. And so it's a really kind of complicated and long, torrid story. But the Bundy family has nothing to do with the Hammonds, and they've inserted themselves into an issue when they should not have.
So they're using this to grandstand and draw attention to themselves.
Absolutely. And, what frustrates me most is that Bundy's wearing a cowboy hat and cowboy boots, essentially pretending to be a rancher, which he's not. He doesn't ranch with his father. He lives in Arizona. He runs a car valet service, which, several news outlets have now kind of really shown a light on him, that he recently took a $530,000 grant from the government, from the Small Business Administration. And so here he is talking bad about the government and how the government is so evil, and yet taking government money to subsidize his small business.
Well, it's amazing when you look into the background of some of these nut jobs. Where's this going to go? What's the solution? What do you think the government's going to do? I mean, I've heard a lot of people say that we got another Waco on our hands.
They are itching for a gun to be fired on them. There's just no question about it. They now consider themselves activists in the likes of Rosa Parks, which is what, Bundy tweeted recently. It is terrifying that it has gone to this point, but I also put a lot of blame onto the Republican Party. from as early as 2009, when they were stoking the fires of the far-right folks who considered themselves part of the Tea Party. They're the ones responsible for all of this heated hate towards the government. It's surprising that Republicans have actually spoken out against the Bundy family versus what they did last time, where they were essentially hugging them and encouraging them to take the government on. But I do fear that they are waiting for a bullet to be shot, that one of their guys will be tired and hungry and start to shoot themselves. So I do think that it is an escalated situation, and I know, our government and our brave, folks in the military, National Guard are probably on pins and needles right now.
Jane Kleeb, Bold, Nebraska. She has written a piece on her website at WeGotEd.com. Bundy is all hat, no cattle. You also bring up big oil and what has happened with land grabs in this country by big corporations. What about that?
Rick Santorum was recently on MSNBC talking about the Bundy situation, and he essentially said, look, what they are doing is wrong, but I agree with them about, eminent domain and the government taking land away from farmers and ranchers. And he has so got it backwards. What's happening with big oil is they are working hand in hand with the BLM, and that's what Bundy should be, outraged about. They continue to hand out oil, gas, coal leases on public land owned by all of us as taxpayers to do their polluting extraction activities. And that's the thing that's taking land away from farmers and ranchers, because I know folks don't quite get it, and then they say that farmers and ranchers are takers because they're grazing on public land for lower prices than they would on private land. But reality is, farmers and ranchers, when they do that, they are essentially adding to the soil health. When you have cattle on the land, it's what it was back in the day when, farmers and ranchers really had more control of the land. It's better for the land for cattle to graze on it than it just to sit there. That is just a fact. And I talk about that a little bit in the blog piece.
Yeah. What should the government do? Just stand down and just let the enthusiasm die? Is that a solution? Would that happen? Could that happen? And would it be effective?
Eventually I do think that they're just going to run out of food. And I think that the government should essentially make sure that they have no access to food, no access to water, no access to electricity. So the Bundy folks do have to stand down. I don't think that the government should go in there with force. And I just think that that would escalate things and essentially play into what they want to happen. So I think what the government's doing right now is exactly what they should be doing. But I also think the government, on the much larger issue of BLM land, should stop giving leases to the oil and gas companies and should start really healing relationships with farmers and ranchers around these small towns. It's a problem. Nobody wants to talk about it, but it's a problem. The government is working hand in hand with big oil when they should be healing relationships with farmers and ranchers to protect the land.
Jane Kleeb, always great to visit. Appreciate your work, and thanks so much.
Thanks, Ed.
Bold, Nebraska. Jane Kleeb with us here on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. You can see her work at WeGotEd.com.